Welcome to this first session of this year's RCIA. I'm really excited about this session. I love this. My name is Greg Pratt. I'm the Director of Adult Faith Formation here at the Cathedral, and I'd like to cover two topics tonight, just two. First is, what is faith? And second, RCIA, what to expect. I'm going to walk through the program. And then, if there's a little bit of time left, we'll have some Q&A. Okay? So, what is faith? And this may seem like a really simple question. What is faith? We all have an idea of what faith is, but it's really, really big topic. It really is. And so I'm going to hit a few different aspects of it, including my favorite exploration, absolute favorite exploration of what it means to believe. I love this. I'm a big fan, you'll get to know me. I'm a big fan of pulling apart simple words and then looking at them from different angles to give them more meaning and then putting them back together. And then when we go back to that word, it's just richer. It has a deeper meaning to it. I like doing that, and I like picking up Greek words every once in a while and talking about those too. But, we do that twice tonight actually, but it's fun. So I like breaking apart those words or those simple concepts and digging at them from different angles because they're interesting. There's a lot of the things that we take for granted are actually a little bit more complex than we give it credit for. So when you add back those nuances, you put it all back together, and it's now just a single word for you, but it just means so much more. So we're going to try and do that today with what is faith. To begin, let me share something about me that might help you understand how I speak, how I think, and how I speak. I was raised without faith. I was raised in a household without faith, and I spent the first 48 years of my life not believing in God. So that might help you understand how I come to look at different things. I really wanted to believe in God. I really did for about that whole time, but I just couldn't do it because I was raised with math and science. You know, math and science explains the whole world. You don't really need God, right? That's sort of what I was raised with. So it was a big struggle, but I finally got there. But in fact, one of my earliest memories, I think it's my second earliest memory of my entire life, had to do with my desire for faith. What happened was I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I had a sleepover at a friend's house on a Saturday night, right? And the family, the next morning, Sunday morning, they go to church. They weren't going to leave me in their house alone, so they took me to church. And I'm sure if it was known that I was going to be going to church, I would not have been allowed to sleep over. But I ended up in church, and I remember I still have this visual memory of just like looking around and going, I don't know what these people have, but it's really attractive, and I really wish I had it. And I was really young at the time. There was just something about it that made me go, I want to know this, but nobody had ever talked to me about God. So it took me a long time. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted it. So I'd like to take just another couple of minutes to explain or to share what actually supercharged my faith, or supercharged my desire for faith and my pursuit of faith. It'll serve two purposes. First, it'll give you guys a little bit more understanding about me and just how I think, and therefore understanding how I speak. But also, we'll start to explore one of the key aspects of faith as we go through this. It's a moment that utterly changed my life. In the spring of 2011, I was reading an absolutely fascinating book. For the first 7 chapters of this book, the author was talking about just simple human interactions. You know, you think about how you talk to somebody, and you think about the give and take and the words that are used and the assumptions that are made, and you sort of walk through that and had us learn a little bit about human nature by studying the things that we're sort of very familiar with, and about morality and our own sense of humanity. And I absolutely fell in love with the way that this author wrote. And then in the 8th chapter, he brought up the concept of God, and he started describing Jesus. And for a few paragraphs, the author described how Jesus went around forgiving sins and healing people and so forth. And then he explained that he put this introduction together in this way to make sure that, in his words, nobody made the foolish statement that a lot of people make about Jesus. And that is that I am ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't believe that he's God. And that statement hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, I literally remember it as if it was yesterday. It was like 13 years ago at this point. That statement hit me like a ton of bricks, because that's exactly that was exactly my understanding of Jesus up until that point in my life. I had spent 40 plus years believing that Jesus was a great moral teacher, but not God. And in one little burst of a paragraph, this author just blew that away. Because he said, he had my attention, and he went on to explain that it was logically impossible to have that point of view about Jesus. He said that, and this is so simple, I didn't get it for 40 years. Any man who was simply a man who went around saying and doing the things that Jesus did could not be considered a great moral teacher. You couldn't even consider him moral, right? He went around saying he was God. A man who's just a man, who goes around saying he's God, is not a great moral teacher. I said, oh my gosh, that makes absolutely perfect sense. So what I had understood about Jesus for my entire life was wiped away, which is a good thing because it led me to faith. But he said, the author said that based upon what Jesus said and did, there's really only 3 logical ways to view Jesus, right? C.S. Lewis. Yes, exactly. I was leaving that for later, but thank you, Liz. So there's only 3 logical ways to look at Jesus. Either he's not God, and he knows he's not God, in which case he's a very bad man. He's a liar. Or he's not God, but he thinks he's God, in which case he's crazy. He's a lunatic. Or the third choice is that he is God, in which case he's our Lord and Savior. So it was one of those 3. And I remember that night, and I'm like, my worldview's hit because I've just been hit in the head with a 2x4 going, Greg, you got to wake up. And I looked at those 3 options, right? Those are the only 3 logical ways to look at Jesus. And I said, okay, I hadn't really dug into the Bible. I hadn't opened the Bible. And I said, okay, but let me just think about this. So I put myself in the mindset, can I think of him as a liar? Nope, that didn't work. Can I think of him as a lunatic? Nope, that doesn't work. Can I think of him as Lord? And I really couldn't put that out of my head. I'd love to say that I came to faith at that moment, but I didn't. It took about another year. But that supercharged my faith because it made me realize that there was something more. And there was something that I wanted my entire life. And now that thing that I was holding on to, that understanding of Jesus that I'd holding on to was gone. So I had to fill it with something. So that supercharged my faith, supercharged my pursuit of faith. And then faith came a little over a year later. As Luce mentioned, the author's name is C.S. Lewis, and the book is called Mere Christianity. It's a great book. He's a great author. I love him. One of the best authors of the 20th century. And so when I said that I came to faith about a year later, I mean more than just I accepted the fact that Jesus was the Son of God. It was more than that when I say I believed in God at that point. I believed in Jesus. And the best way I know how to explain this is using the most famous verse in the Bible and picking it apart. Anybody want to take a guess at what the most famous verse of the Bible is? Right. It's the one they write on the back of, things behind, at a baseball game, they hold it up behind home plate to make sure everybody reads it. John 3:16, right? So John 3:16 says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." It's like the gospel in miniature. And look at these points. The first one is God's love, for God so loved the world. The second one is God's sacrifice. He gave his only Son. And the fourth one is God's promise, that should not perish, but have eternal life. That third one, though, is our responsibility. I don't worry about those 3 because God is trustworthy, so he'll do those 3. That whole thing boils down to whether or not we're going to respond properly. Our response is that whoever believes in the Son, whoever believes in him, it all boils down to that one word. What is faith? What is belief? Right? So let's get rid of this stuff over here and move this up over there. So if everything hinges on that word believes, if everything hinges on it, we really should understand that word believes well. So what does that mean? Well, in English, we sort of know what believes means, right? Everybody here has a concept of what the word believes means. I believe this. If you give me these numbers, these 6 numbers, and I draw a line underneath it and I put the sum together, I believe that these add up to that. I believe that. But that's just a fact. I believe in a fact. And believe in this sense is more than that, because we're more than just our intellect. To pick this apart, I'm going to go back to the original Greek. The Bible was written in Greek, and the first Greek word of the night, there's only two. The first Greek word of the night, it's one of my favorites, is the word that is translated as believes. In the original Greek, it's Pisteuon. What does Pisteuon mean? Okay, we just sort of move it to a different language. But Pisteuon has a little bit of a richer texture. Okay, Pisteuon can mean three different things. And all of them help us understand what faith means. So belief is more than just adding up a bunch of numbers and saying that I believe that the bottom one is the sum, because we're more than just our intellect. God made us with a body and a soul, and that soul has both an intellect and a will. So our intellect is only half of it, half of the picture. So when we believe in a fact, that's not quite all of it. There's another aspect to it, because knowing math comes from your intellect. But loving someone comes from your will. Okay? Agreeing to a fact comes from intellect, and your motivation comes from your will. Your will handles things like decisions, emotions, actions, desires. It's responsible for love and faith and caring. Full faith, full belief comes from both of those two things together. So it's agreeing to a fact, but then also entrusting yourself to it. And that's the first way we could retranslate Pisteuon if we wanted to. That whoever entrusts himself to him. So, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever entrusts himself to the Son should not perish but have eternal life. That's another way to look at that sentence, right? Whoever entrusts himself to the message that Jesus had that Jesus came to bring us. Now, I happen to use the word entrusting, and I've already pointed out that I like words. I use the word entrusting. Some people would say submit or surrender. You surrender to God. You surrender to Jesus. You submit. And those are perfectly good words. If those are the words that are used to, that's fine. Those are perfectly good words. I just happen to be really picky. I like the word entrust for a reason. You can submit or surrender to God who loves you tremendously. Or, in a bad circumstance, you can submit or surrender to a tyrant who's pushing you down and saying, you've got to submit. So it has a dual meaning depending on what the situation is. So I just like the word entrust because you can only possibly entrust yourself to someone who you trust, right? So I happen to like the word entrust. But if you're used to the word submit or surrender for that, that's fine. It works out just fine. Another way to look at Pisteuon is whoever has been persuaded by him. And this one makes perfect sense. Would you believe someone if they haven't persuaded you? So it makes perfect sense. So it's just another way to look at it, right? If you believe someone, they have persuaded you. So it adds something to the word. And the last one, there's only three. The last one I'm going to work up to. There's a line in the Bible in the Gospel of Matthew, and I know we haven't covered the Bible yet. And if any of you are really young in the faith and you don't, and I'm just hitting a couple of Bible verses, it's okay. We'll get to it in a couple of weeks. But there's a line in the Bible, in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." And he's talking to his disciples, his students. And when he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me," he's saying something very specific. If there are any farmers in the room, you'll get this. Okay? Let's say you're on a farm and you've got to take the hay bales from one end of the farm to the other end of the farm. So you put it on the cart and you hook up two oxen in front of the cart. And you want to go in that direction. But what happens if the oxen want to go in that direction? They just want to pull in different directions. You're not going to get anywhere, right? So in order to make it work, you yoke them together. You put this little M-shaped thing over their shoulders to make sure they're pointed in the same direction, right? So that's what a yoke is. So when Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me," he's bringing this idea into play. Think about those two oxen. Once they're yoked together, are they seeing the world the same way? They have to be looking in the same place. So what Jesus is saying by "take my yoke upon you and learn from me" is see the world the way I see the world. So another way to look at Pisteuon, the third and final way, is that whoever adopts his worldview. And that's really key, because we're going to be spending a lot of time throughout this year on the worldview, okay? So, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever adopts his worldview should not perish but have eternal life. Let me drive this point home with an analogy. Imagine that there's a father and a son, And as the son is growing up, the father, just picture a father who's just really successful in all sorts of areas of life. He's successful in business, he's successful in relationships, he's successful in his marriage, he's successful all over the place. And what he wants more than anything else is to pour his wisdom into his son as his son is growing up. Can you picture this? Okay, it might not echo your home life. It doesn't echo my early home life, but picture it. Okay, this father is trying to pour his wisdom into his son. So the whole time his son is growing up, he's giving little bits and pieces of wisdom to his son all throughout his formative years. And sometimes it's paragraphs, sometimes it's just a single sentence, but it's all sorts of different stuff. Now imagine that when the son is maybe like 16, 17 years old, he's still living with dad, he's not out on his own yet, but at about 16 or 17 years old, you pull him aside and you say, do you remember what it is that your father has taught you? Because he's been trying to pour out all of this great wisdom to you. And the son, let's pretend for a moment, the son has an absolutely perfect memory. He can literally recite back to you every single sentence his father has ever told him as he's been growing up. Okay, can you picture that? Now, the question is, has the son adopted his father's worldview? Has he adopted his father's worldview at that point? Anybody want to venture a guess? Yes or no? Yes? No? How many yeses? How many no's? It's no. He knows his father's worldview very well. And that can confuse us a little bit. He knows his father's worldview completely. But how do we know when he has adopted his father's worldview? Right? How do we know when he's adopted the father's worldview? How does the father know when the son has adopted the worldview? And even, how does the son even know when he has truly adopted his father's worldview? His actions, right. When he gets out from under his father's roof and he goes and lives that way, right? Because that means that the father has persuaded him of the best way to live, that he has entrusted himself to that message, to that worldview. That's the only proof of the fact that he believes. Believes isn't a matter of memorizing things. Believing is, this changed my life. I have entrusted myself to this worldview. That's what it means. So acting out the worldview is the only authentic way to say that you have faith. It's what it means to have faith. Bottom line is, if Jesus persuades us of the best way to live, then it makes sense to live that way, right? If we're truly persuaded that's the best way to live, we don't have to be told. We just do it out of pure self-interest, if nothing else, right? So when you truly and substantially believe something, it becomes a part of you, and it affects your choices and your behavior every day automatically. You don't even have to think about it. It just becomes a part of you when you adopt that worldview. And if that worldview, if that's something that you truly believe is God's worldview, then it makes you a better friend, it makes you a better spouse, it makes you a better neighbor. You become more confident. Things that once caused you anxiety don't anymore because you see the world differently. There's just a peace that comes over you that is indescribable. So what is this worldview? That's what we're going to be covering over the course of RCIA. I can't cover it in one night. That's why we meet for a whole bunch of time. So it takes a little while to do that. So this worldview is like God's user's manual. Okay? God loves us and he created us, and he's really smart, to say the least. He created us, he knows what's best for us, and because he loves us, he tells us the best way to live, because he wants us to live a great, fulfilling, successful life. And we just need to pay attention to what the worldview is and then sell ourselves out to it and just adopt that worldview. Entrust ourselves to it. So that's the worldview, God's perfect user's manual for us humans. Now, when you own something really, really precious, well, before I say that, we're used to, you get something, first thing you do, you open up the box and there's a user's manual in it. And for most things, you just sort of toss it because you just want to get to the thing and start playing with it right away. But when something's really, really precious, you actually read the user's manual, okay? Imagine you've got like a brand new Ferrari. You're going to read the user's manual because you don't want to mess that thing up, and you want it to run properly. But let's say you or a friend live on that farm, and you need to get those hay bales from one end of the farm to the other end of the farm, and you go, hey, I've got this super-powered Ferrari. Let's just tow the cart with the Ferrari, right? So let's do this. How's that going to work? Okay. In case you can't picture this, that's sort of what it looks like. Okay? It's a really silly picture, but that Ferrari is doing something that it's not designed to do. And the people who made it, Ferrari, gave you a user's manual that says, don't do that. This thing deserves to be on asphalt. It deserves to be on a track, but at least asphalt. Don't do this. Okay? The question is whether or not you've read the user's manual, whether you say, I'm going to live by that user's manual. Okay? If you don't, you end up here, and you end up towing it out with a tractor, which is meant to do this. It gets stuck. Now, you are infinitely more precious than a Ferrari. Infinitely. It's beyond words. You should read the user's manual. It's really good for you. And that's what we're going to be studying for the next several weeks. It leads to happiness, it leads to success, it leads to a good life. Anyway, so this is our first night together, and as I said, I know that there might be a few of you that aren't familiar with the Bible. This is the last time I bring it up. I know the last time I said it was the last time, but I forgot this one. Really quick. There's a scene in the Bible where Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And you go, okay, Jesus is telling me to be perfect. I'm going to let him down. Right? How many people think you can be perfect? We can't. And the Bible even tells us we can't. Okay? But that's not what Jesus is saying here. If you go back to the Greek, this is the second Greek word of the night. There's only two. This is the second Greek word of the night. The word that is translated as perfect is teleos. I don't have it up on the screen because I'm going to leave the Ferrari up there for a little bit. The Greek word for perfect the Greek word that's translated as perfect is teleos, which comes from telos. Something's telos is the purpose for which it exists, the reason it exists. So be perfect is do what it was that you were created for. That's what it means. It doesn't mean to be error-free, flawless, completely immune to temptation. It doesn't mean that. It means do what it is that I created you for. Fulfill that. Okay? Don't go out and get in the mud if you're a Ferrari. Stay on the asphalt, And for humans, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but we'll get there. Because that line, if you just think about the English, be perfect, you go, I'm destined to fail on that one. But if you understand, he's saying, fulfill your purpose. Do that. God made us with a purpose, and he shares that purpose with us. Our response to God's love, to God's sacrifice, to God's promise is what our faith is our response to that. So that's the deciding factor. Are we going to live out our purpose? It's the best, most fulfilling way to live, because otherwise God wouldn't tell us to live this way. But it's still our choice. And that's why we're studying our faith together. We know that we won't be perfect in the English sense. We're all going to make mistakes. I do all the time. Okay? But instead, we're going to be striving to learn what God's worldview is so that we can be perfect in the sense of being in alignment with that worldview to the best we can. Okay? So, quick recap. What is faith? Faith is our response to God. It's entrusting ourselves to his message. It's adopting his worldview. And I'm going to hit just a couple of more things, and then we'll go into the overview of RCIA, because that's what I'm going to do on this second part here. Our modern world would love to have us think that faith and reason are in conflict all the time. That's what I grew up believing, that faith and reason are completely incompatible. And that's not true, okay? The fact of the matter is that faith actually complements reason. They work together. Faith and reason move towards and go after different types of truth. Okay? Science can tell us how the universe works. God can tell us why it works that way. Science can't tell us that. So there's different truths that it goes after, and they work together, because truth can't contradict truth. So they do actually work together. Science claims that there's nothing knowable outside of science, and that's a false claim. I love science. I'm a math and science geek. I've invented things. I've got patents to my name. I love science. But science has limitations. It can only find a subset of the truth. And the most important things in your life that you'll ever want to know the answer to can't possibly be answered by science. It can't be answered by your intellect. It goes beyond that. It goes to faith. Things like, why am I here? What is my purpose? Do I love this person? How should I live my life? Those kinds of questions science can't answer for us. It goes beyond that. So both faith and reason go for truth, but kind of different kinds of truth. But they do interlock. Faith and reason can both find truth. They work together, and they can actually even cross-check each other because, again, faith can't contradict truth. It works together. Next, faith requires free will, just like love requires free will. Love is completely useless without free will. If you were forced to love the person that you are in love with, it wouldn't mean anything to you. It wouldn't mean anything to them. Free will is the only thing that makes love worthwhile. Free will is the only thing that makes faith worthwhile. And it's the only way faith actually works. Now, God's grace, his gift to you, encourages you to seek faith. And you cooperate with that with your free will. But he does the prompting to begin with. But just by searching for your faith, you are cooperating with God. Okay? Literally, by being here in the room tonight, you are cooperating with God. Because he's saying, search out your faith a little bit deeper. The world is crazy out there. Okay? But God, he's saying, I'm a rock. Okay? Come find me. Hold on to me tighter. So by being here, you're cooperating with his grace that has prompted him for you to be here, which is kind of neat. Last thing. Faith requires perseverance. It drives you to get a little bit better every day. That's what faith should do. It's not a once and done kind of thing at all. Faith literally changes us for the better. It changes the way you look at the world and the way you live your life 24/7. It's not a 1 hour a week kind of thing. That's not what faith is. It literally changes you. You're adopting a worldview, and it automatically changes you. Now, throughout, I think that's the last of the clicker for a little bit. Throughout the RCIA program, I'm going to be teaching as best I can from the heart of the Catholic faith, the dead core center, solid part that's been there for 2,000 years. Now, some people, even some Catholics, don't really know where the heart of the Catholic faith is. I'm going to do my best to teach just from that. But some people don't know where the core is and where the mistakes and the errors start. One example is some people say, well, Catholics think they earn their way into heaven. You ever heard that one? I have. Catholics think they earn their way into heaven. And based upon what we've just covered, does that sound right? Okay? It's a matter of we understand that the worldview changes us, and therefore we act in the world, and that is our faith. It's not we're trying to buy our way into heaven. That is our faith. The good works is what it means to have faith, to have been changed by the worldview. But somehow in the language of trying to explain that, some people say, well, you earn your way into heaven because you think good works are important. Yeah, I do think good works are important because that means that my faith has taken root. So I'm excited that my faith has taken root, but sometimes in the words you get things kind of mixed up. I'll explain next week. Next week is one of my absolutely favorite talks. Next week I'll explain what this core is and why it's central to the faith and why it is objectively true and absolutely unassailable. Incidentally, things like Catholics earn their way into heaven or great moral teacher, those are mistakes, obviously, but they stick. They stick. Why do they stick? I've thought about this, and they stick because statements like great moral teacher, well, that's easy to remember. It sounds kind of plausible. And most importantly, it satisfies a curiosity. Who's Jesus? Great moral teacher. Okay, thanks. I've got it answered. I'm done. I don't have to pursue it any further than that, right? But unfortunately, it satisfies the curiosity away from the truth, away from God. But those statements still stick around. And if we never stop to challenge those false beliefs, if we never challenge them, they stick. And I can vouch for the fact that they can stick for decades until somebody puts something in front of you that makes you realize something. So I'm glad you're all here, because one of the things that we're going to be doing as we go through this is every once in a while we'll hit one of these things. You've thought about this? Anyway, we'll get there. Now, and sometimes these mistakes simply pop up because the words we use are can be interpreted in different ways. If somebody says, "Do you believe in Jesus?" and you go, "Yes," well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you believe that he exists, that he walked on the earth at some point? Do you believe that he's the Son of God, or do you believe in the sense that you've learned and you've studied his worldview and you've adopted that worldview and it's literally changed you? Those are three different ways to interpret that yes. We need to know our faith well. So I hope this explains why we took some time and took apart the word faith. Now we can sort of squeeze it all back together, and now when you look at the word faith, hopefully it's a little richer. Hopefully it means a little something more, and you realize there's some facets to it, as opposed to, oh, I believe a set of numbers is this. It's a little bit more than that. And I look forward to the next few months as we dive into that worldview, that best possible life that God has for us. Last couple of things before we move on to the overview of the RCIA program, which is coming up in like 1 minute. I'd like to highlight a couple of things about, remember at the beginning when I was telling you about myself. I spent 48 years without faith. If you have questions as we go through this, I get it, okay? You want to know more, just ask. It's important to ask questions, otherwise we never grow. Also, it wasn't too long ago that I had no idea what faith was and no idea about the details of it. I didn't know all the theological terms. I didn't know the Latin terms. I didn't know all that kind of stuff. So if you struggle with that as we go through that and you have to ask questions about that, that's fine too. That's fine. It's kind of nice to have somebody who's spent a lot of time without faith, because I'm not going to judge. I went through that. That's not a problem at all. You don't just sort of pop into the world knowing all this stuff. So we'll go through it. And I certainly don't expect you to know what the entire RCIA process is, which is why I'm going to explain it to you now and give you an overview so that you know what to expect. First, what is RCIA? Well, it's technically the rite of Christian initiation of adults, but that doesn't really tell you a whole heck of a lot. The simplest explanation is that the RCIA program will prepare you to become Catholic. Start with that. There's something called the Easter Vigil. That's the Mass that we have the night before Easter. And it's called a vigil because we're waiting vigil. We're waiting vigilantly for the next day when Jesus rises. So we're waiting vigilantly. That's why it's called the Easter Vigil, when it's the night before. And at that Easter Vigil, you'll be welcomed into the church. And because you're at the cathedral, you'll be welcomed in by the bishop, with a little extra plus. And if you haven't been baptized yet, and there's, I think, 8 of you that haven't been baptized yet, you'll receive baptism there. But you'll also receive 2 more baptisms, whether you've been baptized or not baptized. If you're coming to the Catholic Church, you'll receive at least these 2, and possibly baptism if you haven't been baptized. You'll receive the sacrament of confirmation and of Eucharist. And I'm not going to explain those now. We explain those later throughout RCIA. But you receive 2 more sacraments. And at this point, you'll be called what's called in full communion with the Catholic Church. And it's a slight bit more accurate to say that what RCIA does is prepares you to be in full communion with the Catholic Church. Why is that? Well, because RCIA is for 2 purposes. One is for those of you that are outside the Catholic Church who want to come in, but then there's also, and there's about 50-50 split in this class, 50% of you want to be coming into the Catholic Church, and then 50% of you are already baptized Catholic, but you just haven't finished your sacraments. You're missing 1 or 2 of those second 2 sacraments, right? So, and to do that, when you receive all your sacraments, you're in full communion with Catholic Church. You're like an adult in the Catholic Church, and that's what you're striving for. So that's what those are. So, like I say, it's about 50-50. Half of you are becoming Catholic, and about half of you are what's called completing your sacraments. For both of you, we're going to spend the next few months in a deep dive into our faith, learning God's worldview so that we can have a fuller faith and prepare to enter the Catholic Church, or prepare to be in full communion with the Catholic Church. Now, in addition to, I think there's 44 of you in the RCIA program right now, which is amazing. In addition to those 44 of you, there are also a handful of you who are parishioners who just asked me, can I stick around and learn a little bit more about the faith? Can I hang out in the RCIA program? So there's a few of you that aren't actually in the RCIA program, just hanging around. And then there's 11 very special people in the room who are your RCIA support team. And they're the ones that are wearing the little lanyard thing that I took off and I can't find right now. So if you see somebody wearing one of those little lanyard things, they're part of the RCIA support team. That's Bill and Kathy, and Ken and Sherry, Jake and Deidre, Jody, Robin at the front table, Julia, Kim, and Michael. And you'll probably get to meet at least one or two or all of them throughout the program. But those are the guys that sort of make sure that the food's there, move tables around, and get all that kind of stuff worked out. So they're here too. Real quick, before I get to the walkthrough of the RCIA program that we're going to be doing, I'm just going to mention two quick things. First of all, there is a close parking lot to here. You can actually park on the north side of the building. There's a small parking lot there with 29 spots. It won't fit all of you, but if you get there quick, you're just steps away from that door, which I'll always have open. So you can come in on the north side of the building. There's a little parking lot. That's a trick. Okay, that's a nice little thing. And second, next week, our second week together, I'm going to be giving a talk in this room just before RCIA. So I'm going to finish up about 15 minutes before. So about 6:45, I'll be finishing. So if you show up more than 15 minutes early, you will be hearing the end of the talk that I'm going to give you next week. So if you like spoilers, come on in and just be here, and you'll hear the end before you get there. So anyway, just to let you know why there will be people, as you're coming in next week, there will be people leaving. It's not that I've upset anybody. It's just I finished talking and they're leaving now. Okay, so with those two announcements out of the way, let me go through an overview. First of all, typical Tuesday nights. Well, we're a good portion of the way through a typical Tuesday night. I'm going to talk for 45, 50, 55 minutes. It sort of depends on what the subject matter is. Then we'll take a short break. You can stretch your legs, you can grab some more cookies, you can hit the restroom, whatever. Then we'll come back and we'll do Q&A. I'm not sure exactly how it'll work with a group this large, but we'll figure it out, okay? Maybe we'll have to break up into groups. Maybe we'll do it. I've got a wireless mic here. I'll throw it out there. I don't know. We'll figure it out, okay? It's a little bit new, and it's great to see you all, but it's a little bit new. We'll figure it all out together. I try, when I'm putting a talk together, to think about the questions that you'd have and actually answer them in the talk, okay? So the best possible situation for me is for none of you to have any questions at the end. Okay, I've done my job, but then we all get to leave early because there's no questions. We'll figure this out as it goes. And every once in a while, there's going to be a talk where the subject matter is such that I'm actually going to talk long, and the Q&A will be very short that week. We'll go through there. I don't mind easy questions. I don't mind hard questions. I really don't. If you happen to stump me, I won't have any problem with it. I'll just say, listen, Kyle, you got me. I've got no idea what the answer to that question is. I'll ask if one of the team members happens to know, and if we don't, I'll say, hey, I'll figure it out, and I'll have the answer for you next week. I've got no problem with that, okay? So don't worry, sit there, I don't want to, cause them to be uncomfortable. I don't have a problem with it. If it's something that's causing you concern, just go ahead and ask away. All I ask is that you be polite, okay? Stay reasonably on topic, okay? And if you happen to be one of those people who likes to ask a question, I'll answer it, then you ask another question, I answer, I ask. If you're that kind of person, just stick around afterward. Let everybody else go on time, and we'll just sort of hang out at the table and we can talk all night. That's fine. There's a late night crew after RCIA that we just sit here and talk forever. You're welcome to be a part of that. So quick questions, but no, forever. Anyway, that's that. Just so you know, I wrote this down because it hit me. There are no tests. There are no quizzes. You'll never be asked, what was that first Greek word you heard? What does this mean? That's not it, okay? You're not accountable to me at all. You're not accountable to Father Gavin at all. You're not accountable to the bishop or to the cathedral. What you're trying to do right now is to get close to God. That's the important thing. If you're doing your best and understanding everything as best you can, that's the test, okay? So you'll never be asked to see if you remembered something or something like that. Each week there's going to be snacks available, something, a little something to drink, some cookies and all that kind of stuff. That's it. And every few weeks, or not every few weeks, but every several weeks, we'll actually have a meal together. We'll get here at like 6:30, and maybe we'll have pizza, maybe we'll cater something in, maybe we'll have Chick-fil-A, I don't know. But we'll have something here, and we can actually eat together as a group to be in communion with one another. This will happen every 6 or 8 weeks or something. I'll let you know in plenty of time so that you know that week you want to get here about a half hour early. I record all of these talks and I post them online. So if there's a handful of people I know couldn't be here tonight because they're out of town or what have you, or if you're sick or something happens, after each session, I'll be sending out a group a group email with a link to that night's, that week's talk. So you can either review if you didn't catch it all the first time, or if you're out of town or something, you can watch it. So that'll work. But I won't record any of the Q&A because I'm okay recording myself, but I'm not going to ask any of you to be recorded. So I won't record the Q&A. So if you can catch up on what we talked about, the main talk, but you will be missing out on the Q&A. So for that reason, really try and be here in person when you can. That's really the best way to do it. Next, the progression of topics. All of our Tuesdays together will follow this basic pattern. You'll also next week receive a book that'll cover a lot of the topics that we cover, and follows it pretty closely. And it's a very well-written book. It gets a little technical at times, but it's a really, really well-written book. It answers a lot of questions. And on any given topic, I might not say everything that's in the book, and the book doesn't cover everything that I say because I go off on all sorts of tangents. So sort of together, you'll get both. If you don't like reading, you'll get everything that you need to out of the talk. And if you like reading and not listening to me when you're out on town, that's fine. The book will cover it too. Some topics stand alone, but most of them build on what has come before. So, week 3, it's good to have heard week 1 and week 2, and so forth. Every once in a while, you'll hit one that just stands alone. I didn't need to know anything beforehand. But a lot of them build, so we want to stay current because it's an organized presentation of the faith. We'll start next week diving into how God reveals himself to us, which is a very interesting topic, how God reveals himself to us. And then we'll move on to the Bible for several weeks. First, we'll talk about the Bible, and then creation in the fall, and Jesus. We'll skip over a whole bunch of the Old Testament, but we just don't have time for everything. And we'll go through that. First of all, the book you'll receive next week is this, Open Wide the Doors to Christ. Again, great book. And the Bible you will receive in 2 weeks' time. When we do this series in the Bible, you'll get a Bible. This Bible, we got a nice fancy one, hardcover this time, which is kind of neat. Throughout the time that we're spending on the Bible and those topics, we're going to be looking at the Catholic understanding of some very big topics and the logic behind them. And in November, December, we'll continue with some big topics. These are a lot of the standalone topics. And then starting in January, we'll walk through the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church. So we'll walk through those, their biblical foundation, their power, and how they work. In late January 21st, if I remember correctly, we have our first guest speaker. You only get to hear me until then. In late January 21st, our bishop comes in and speaks with us. Which is great because this is his parish. So he comes over and he'll address the RCIA group, which is wonderful. A few weeks later, Father Gavin will be walking us through a 3-part series on the Mass. He'll actually go through the biblical foundations of the Mass and spend 3 weeks on the details of the Mass, which is great. Plus, he gives some talks on some of the sacraments. And then, as we approach Easter, very close to Easter, we'll look at church history. Father Brian King comes over and covers 2,000 years of church history in 2 sessions, so 1,000 years a night. He covers 1,000 years of church history per night, and he doesn't look at a note once. It's all in his head. It's amazing to watch. It's fantastic. So we'll look at that, our entrance into heaven, how that works, and then Father Gavin will be back to talk about Holy Week and prepare us for that, because at that point we're getting close to the Easter Vigil. There are a couple of non-Tuesdays that we get together. There's only a few, but they're important. 1 or 2 dates are still being finalized, which is why I don't have a final schedule for you today. If you picked up a schedule at the front, you'll notice it says tentative or something like that. But I'll have a final schedule for you next week because we're going to wrap up the solidifying these dates. There's something called the Rite of Welcome that'll take place in early December, and where we will all descend upon the 10:30 Mass together. We'll all be there at the 10:30 Mass, and at one point in the Mass, Father Gavin will invite us all up, and the congregation, all of the parishioners will officially welcome us in the pursuit of our faith through RCIA. It's beautiful, and they'll pray for us, and they'll pray for our ongoing learning that we're doing. It's a beautiful thing. We're officially welcomed by the parish at that point in time. Starting in January, at the 10:30 Mass, if you're attending the 10:30 Mass, there'll be a dismissal time where you'll go with one of the RCIA team members, one or two or three or however many there are at that Mass, and you'll go off and you can ask questions, and you'll dive deeper into the readings and things like that. So it's kind of like we got Tuesdays, but then Sundays are a little bit more informal, and you get to ask questions a little bit deeper. So that's kind of neat. Then on March 8th, that's a Saturday, there's what's called the Rite of Sending. Again, we will descend upon at that point, the 4:30 Mass, and again, we'll be called up and we will be sent. It's the Rite of Sending. We will be sent to go see the bishop, to tell him that we're seeking entrance into the Catholic Church. That'll happen on March 8th. And then later that same day, we then go back into the cathedral and we're with the bishop and about half of Palm Beach counties that's there, because all of their RCIA people are there. And so normally when it's the Rite of Sending, you get sent and then we all sort of caravan up somewhere. But in this case, because we're at the cathedral, we'll be sent, we'll come over here, we'll hang out for an hour, and then we'll go back over there and meet with the bishop. It's a tiny bit anticlimactic, but at least there's food in the meantime, so it's okay. It's fun. And we get our names written in the book of the elect at that point, or some of you will have your names written in the book of the elect. There's an RCIA retreat that we'll have on March 29th, and we'll meet then and we'll focus in a different way on our journey of faith, in a different way as we move towards Easter, because that's 3 weeks before the Easter Vigil, which is the next thing to talk about, the Easter Vigil. This is the big night. This is the Saturday before Easter. I already explained that. And the bishop himself will welcome you into the church. For those of you who need baptism, you'll be baptized. And whoever needs either one of the two other sacraments, sacrament of confirmation or sacrament of Eucharist, you'll receive those as well. At the end of the night, all of you will have all three sacraments under your belt. You'll be in full communion with the church. That's what it means to go through this RCIA process. Last thing, after Easter. We will actually continue to meet after Easter. Remember I said that faith changes your life? It's not just a stop, there's not a stopping point. It changes your life. We will meet every Tuesday for the rest of your life. That's what we're going to do. I'm just kidding. We will meet. We'll meet for probably about 4 or 5 weeks afterward, just to go over any questions you've got as new Catholics, and sort of, well, what is this? What's this? What is it? Well, because there's all sorts of things that sort of come to you after the Easter Vigil, and it's a very exciting time. So we'll meet for 4 or 5 weeks after that for what's called the period of mystagogy, and then this past year, several folks wanted to do like a Bible study. So we did an 8-week Bible study. We covered the entire Bible in 8 weeks. In 8 sessions, which we actually squeezed into 4 sessions, which was kind of amazing. So we might do that again this year. If there's enough of you interested, we might do that too. But that's after the Easter Vigil, which is like the what we're all aiming for. So I'm really looking forward to these next few months. There was last little thing, and then we open up for Q&A. As I came to faith 12 plus years ago, I started going to Bible studies, and about a year or two into the Bible study, I was just thinking one day, and I thought to myself, wow, the Bible study group that I was with was like about 20-25 people, and I felt very, very close to all these people. I mean, I really, really felt close to these people, and it sounds strange, but I couldn't figure out why, because I really didn't know a whole heck of a lot about them. I didn't know, except for like 1 or 2 of them, I didn't know what they did for a living. I didn't know anything about their family. I didn't know about anything about their history. I didn't know anything. And then it dawned on me that the reason I felt close to these people is that we've been spending intentional effort all moving in the same direction towards God. See, tonight and the next several weeks or the next couple of months it'll play out however it plays out. But tonight, as we sit here, we're all in different places, right? Some of us came from here, some of us came from here. We're in all sorts of different places. We've got all sorts of different personalities, but we're all aiming for God. We're all aiming for that spot. That's why we're here. So over the course of the next several weeks, couple of months, we're all going to be moving closer to God. And as we do that, we're also moving closer to one another. So I expect that will happen with most of us. If you're a wallflower, you want to stay in the background, that's fine. I'm not trying to tense you out or anything else, but it just sort of naturally happens because we're all aiming for the same place. And it's nice to be around people who want to do the right thing, especially in this crazy world that we live in. Anyway, I'm looking forward to that, and that's it for my section of the evening. Now we can move on to Q&A. Yeah, that's it. Anybody have any questions, comments?